Now, in our last video, I know I mentioned that we have all the fundamentals necessary to start to create a basic game in Java or a program, but there was a couple more things I wanted to mention, and that is the first one being methods. So if you have a use in Java that you would want to use throughout your program, or basically a piece of code that you would want to use throughout your entire program multiple times, it would make sense to write that piece of code once and then just call that specific piece of code throughout your program wherever it's necessary. So to create a method, in fact, we've already created one in the beginning. We've created our main method. But to create our own method, it's very similar. We'll have public, static, and then void, and then we can just say our own method. And so within here, we can just write some code saying this is our own method call. Alright, and so now outside of our program, or in our main method where our actual program runs, we can just simply call this method. So if I just say our own method, we can call it there, we can call it maybe at the end as well, maybe we can call it a couple times. So when we run this program now, we're going to see, oh, this is our own method call multiple times throughout the program. And so this makes it a lot more concise. So if you imagine we have, a method that prints out a lot of things, it wouldn't make sense if we had to manually write these each and every time we wanted to call the method. It just makes more sense to just call the method and then write this thing once. So now you can see we have it like this. Now another important functionality in Java is, or something that you would want to do in your own program, is to get user input from the program. So if the user types something into the console, we can use that in our own program and then basically have a more interactive experience with the user. So to do that, we can use a class inside Java called the scanner class. And what this does is it allows you to grab user input and use it within your program. So you might see a red squiggly line when you write this line here, and that's because you're lacking the import at the top. So if you don't have this, you can just add import java.util.scanner, and this basically imports the functionality we need to get user input. So say now we're all the way at the bottom here. I wanted the user to input something, right? Say like enter a number between 1 and 10. Then we could do int user input is equal to sc dot next int. So when we do this here, we can then print out, let's say your number is, that we can put in user input. So now if we go to run this program, it's going to prompt us to say enter a number between 1 and 10. And you notice that it's not going to this line here because it's basically waiting for us to enter a number. So if I enter, say, 4, we then get out your number is 4. And so with this, we can use the numbers or the values that the user interacts with or inputs into our program and then use that to build some functionality out of it. So now that you have these kind of fundamentals, we can start with building our first basic program in Java. So to do that, I'm going to create a new package just to separate everything and make it a lot more easier to navigate towards. So I'm just going to create my first game or something like that. So I'm just going to create a package called my first game, and I'm going to create a class called tic-tac-toe. So within this tic-tac-toe class, I'm going to create all the code necessary to run a game of tic-tac-toe in the console. So the first thing we want to do is create a main method. So we could just do that by, writing main, or public static void, main string square bracket args if you want to write it all manually if you want to. And then within this, we're gonna just create some, maybe first off, maybe a system.out.println, welcome to our game of tic-tac-toe. And now I would want to create something for the user to basically interact with. So when we run the program, it's just going to print this out, and that's it. That's not much of a game. So the first thing I want to do is probably create some sort of board for the user. So maybe we can create something like this, and then print it out. So now we have like a 3x3 board. So if we print this, we could see we have this board of tic-tac-toe almost. Now what we want to do is basically grab the user input for the coordinates of each of these game boards. So this would be 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2. And we're probably going to print this board out multiple times throughout the game, so it might be useful to, instead of printing this out manually, we could do a public static void, we'll call it print board. And we will pass in this here. And we could just simply do print board as such. Now what we're going to want to do is actually have some data towards the game. So right now we're just actually hard coding these values in, and it's not that efficient. So I would rather have a board essentially. And you can see if we look back at the hello world, which is why I'm going back here, an array seems like the perfect candidate for storing our information because we only have 9 entries. And I'm actually going to do something a little bit more interesting than just a single array. I'm going to create a 2D array. So this we can call our game board. And what we could do is just define it as such. In fact, I'm not going to create an integer of a 2D array of integers. I'm going to create a 2D array of chars, because this can be a char, but this is not an integer. So within this, we can create an array of arrays, and we can have this. So this would be 1, and in fact we could just copy paste this whole thing. And what we could do, instead of printing out this hard-coded version, we can pass in this variable into our method and then just print out the variable itself. So what we could do is call game board 0, 0 plus this plus game board 0, 1. So these are the coordinates of the 2D array, which are going to be storing the values of the game board, and 2. So you can see that it's quite a long line, but thankfully with methods we only need to write this out once basically, and then we can just call this however many times we want within the actual main method. So we could just change the coordinates here. So this would be 1, this would be 2, that would be 1, that would be 2, that would be 1, and that's 2. And now we're getting an error because we need to pass in the game board into our method here. And so to do that, we've defined the game board over here. But when we want to call the print board, we need to pass in the game board value. So we created this game board value, pass it into here, and then this method is taking those values within the game board we passed in and printing them out as such. So now if we run this method, or run this program, we get the exact same output, but now we have a piece of data, basically this 2D array of chars that stores our values in the game. So now what we could do is utilize another programming concept that we have already learned, which is loops. So we know that a game of tic-tac-toe goes up to 9 turns. So what we could do is create a for loop actually. So int I is equal to 0, I is less than 9, I plus plus. So this would basically run 9 times, and what we could do is basically prompt the user for input every single loop or iteration of the loop. So to prompt the user for their input, remember we need the scanner class, so we can do scanner sc equals new scanner system.in. And it might not give us the suggestion to import it, and that's okay, so we could just do import java.util.scanner. So now that error goes away, we can now prompt the user saying system.out.println. We could say x's turn, And then we could do sc dot, or we could do char input is equal to sc dot next. And then we can look through the suggestions here. We probably have one that would work, so we could maybe find a char or next line, I believe, could work as well. And so we can just cast this to a char, I believe. Oh, we're not going to be able to do that. We do sc dot next. We could probably find something like so the workaround, I guess, would be dot next dot char at 0. So that would be the input to get an input for a single character. Now I also want to do one more thing. I want to do a checker of which turn it is. Is it X's turn or is it O's turn? So I can use an if statement and do basically if I, and then we have this percentage sign, which basically means get the remainder. I'm going to check if this equals 0. So two equal signs means, is it checking if the remainder of I divided by 2 is equal to 0. So if that means that is the case, that means it's X's turn. Otherwise, it would be O's turn. And then what we could do is we could basically instead of chars, we should do integers, sorry. So we could say the integer row is equal to sc dot next int, and integer call is sc dot next int. So we just say row call, and we'll do the same thing, row call. And we could do the same thing, we'll just call next int, and int call is equal to sc dot next int. Now you might notice something funny, that we've defined these integers twice, and it's not giving us an error. So if I go back to like this method, and I say int, I don't know, dog is equal to 5, and then I do int dog is equal to 10. It's going to give us an error here, because it's saying there's already a variable called dog defined. But if I go to here, and you see that we have a row, int row here, int row here, it's not giving us an error, because as far as this variable is concerned, it only exists inside this if statement here. Outside of this if statement, it doesn't know of anything else's existence, basically. And so the same thing can apply to this else statement here as well. So you don't see, they don't know of each other's existence, and thus they wouldn't basically interfere with each other. So we can take these row and columns that we get, and we can basically update the game board as such. So we could say game board at 0, or say game board at row and at column is going to be equal to X. And the game board here is going to equal to O. And so basically what we could do is now run this program, and it's giving us and saying, oh, we can input 0 and 0, let's say 1 and 1, and now this is, you know, it's working great, but we can't see the updated board. So what we could do is, we have this print board here, we can just bring this simply inside the loop so that it prints every single time there's a new turn. So we can just say 0, 0. Okay, now we have X's board, let's say O goes 1, 1. Okay, X goes 2, 2. O goes 1, 2, X goes 1, 0, and it'll keep going all the way up until turn 9. And now this works great and all, but there's still some parts missing to it, and we will continue on with that in the next video.